This is the Honors Geometry Semester Exam Review for Unit 1, Topic 3, which is questions 17 through 30. I want to remind you that on the exam you'll be given a formula sheet that looks like this one. So even though it's not really relevant to this topic, it is a tool for you to use during the exam. Question number 17. If figure ABCD is congruent to EFGH, write all 8 side and angle congruent statements. Remember that if we know they're congruent, the order in which we're given in gives us the corresponding parts. So for instance, we know, let's look at angles. Angle A is going to have to be congruent to angle E. Angle B has to be congruent to angle F because those are the corresponding angles. Angle C has to be congruent to angle G, and angle D has to be congruent to angle H. You just have to pick which ones match up. For our sides, we take, for instance, side AB, that's got to be corresponding to side EF. So AB is going to be congruent to EF. We have BC, side BC is going to be congruent to line segment FG. CD is going to be congruent to GH. And then I need that other connecting side, DA or AD. It doesn't really matter as long as you keep the right order. AD is going to be congruent to EH. And those are your 8 side and angle congruent statements. 18 says, if all corresponding sides of 2 figures are congruent and all corresponding angles of the 2 figures are congruent, then the figures must be congruent. That is the definition of congruent figures. All angles are congruent and all sides are congruent. Alright, in the figure below, point S is the midpoint of line segment WU. So we know this is the midpoint of line segment WU, so we know WS is congruent to US. We wish to prove that triangle WSR is congruent to triangle UST. And I want to emphasize that if we're trying to prove those are congruent triangles, we need to keep those corresponding sides, related. Can't mix up the order. So number 19 says, to prove this congruence by SSS, which is side, 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 what 2 additional congruent statements are needed? Well, we already know that this side's congruent to this, but to prove it by side, 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 we need to prove that this side is congruent to this side, and this side is congruent to this side. So we're going to need to know that RW is congruent to, and we can use this to help us. So if I pick RW, then I have to pick TU. So RW is congruent to TU, and RS is congruent to TS. This will give us all 3 sides are congruent, which is SSS. For number 20, to prove this congruence by SAS, what 2 additional congruent statements are needed? So we already know that this side's congruent to this. So we either have to have side angle side or side angle side. So there's 2 different answers that you can produce with this. One is that angle RSW is congruent to angle TSU, and RS is congruent to TS. So that's saying this angle right here is congruent to this angle. And no, we can't say angle S because we don't know what angle that is. And that this side is congruent to this. So we'd have side, angle, side. Another option would be to say that angle RWS is congruent to angle TUS. And if you want, you could say, or angle W is congruent to angle U. And RW is congruent to TU. So this is saying this angle is congruent to this one. We have this side. And we know that this is congruent to this. So we have side, angle, side. For number 21, to prove this congruence by ASA, what two additional congruent statements are needed? Well, ASA, we already have this side. That means that we would need the two angles that are on either side of this. So angle W and angle RSW. So we can say that angle RWS, if you want to say angle W, that's fine, is congruent to angle TUS. If you want to say angle U, that's fine. And angle RSW is congruent to angle TSU. But again, you can't say angle S because we don't know which one you're talking about. For 22, to prove this congruence by AAS, what two additional congruent statements are needed? So that means we need two angles and our side. And so it can be this angle and this angle for angle, angle, side. Or we can take this angle, and side, angle, angle, side. So we're going to have two different answers. One is angle SRW is congruent to angle STU, and angle RWS is congruent to angle TUS. So this one says SRW, if you want to call it angle R, that's fine. And that's congruent to angle STU, or angle T. And RWS, or angle W, is congruent to TUS, or angle U. We also could have angle SRW is congruent to angle STU, and angle RSW is congruent to angle TSU. This gives us SRW, or angle R, and STU, or angle T, so these two are congruent, and then RSW and TSU, so these two angles are congruent. Finally, state two additional congruent statements that will be insufficient to prove the triangle is congruent. There are multiple ways to answer this, but the best way we know is that side-side angle is not sufficient enough criteria to prove triangle congruency. So if I look up here, I can get side-side angle. I can take this side, and this angle. So side, angle. I can take side, angle. I can take angle, side. There's lots of different options. So I'm going to write two of them. I could do angle RSW is congruent to angle TSU, and WR, side WR, is congruent to side UT. Or I could do angle RWS is congruent to angle TUS, and RS is congruent to TS. Both of these would be using the side angle, which is not sufficient enough criteria. So we have RSW, so this angle right here, and TSU, and WR and UT, so side angle, side angle. Or I could do angle RWS, so this angle right here, and TUS, and RS and TS. So I could have side angle and side angle. Neither of these prove triangle congruency, so it would be insufficient to prove the triangle's congruent. 24. Consuela wants to determine the length of a power line that will be stretched over a lake. She cannot walk through the lake, but she was able to take some measurements hoping to determine the length. Her measurements are shown below. Notice that the figure is not drawn to scale. Consuela believes that the length of the power line is 625 feet, but she's not sure how to explain this to her boss. Using what you know about triangle congruence, help Consuela by writing a brief report as to why the length of the power line is 625 feet. Well, if we look at this, we can see that we have 500 feet here and 500 feet here. So this is congruent to this. We have 450 feet here and 450 feet here. So this side is congruent to this side. And we know that this angle is congruent to this because of vertical angles. So this gives us side, angle, side. All right? And side, angle, side proves triangle congruency. And if we prove triangle congruency and know that this triangle is congruent to this triangle, then by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, CPCTC, we know that this side is congruent to this. So Consuela is right. We just now need to write a brief report for her. Remember, we haven't done formal proofs yet. It's not asking us to write a formal proof, but we're going to use this idea to write the brief report. So we just walked through how to do that. So I'm going to have it typed up right here. So let's walk through this. The 500-foot sides of each triangle are congruent. The 450-foot sides of each triangle are congruent. The angle included, I think this is a key word, the angle included between the 450-foot side and the 500-foot side of each triangle is congruent because they are vertical angles. So due to the side angle side theorem, SAS theorem, the two triangles are congruent. This means that the power line is 625 feet because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, CPCTC. This would be a good enough report to prove why the length of the power line is 625 feet. Look at triangles ABC and FED below. In items 25 through 30 below, I know it says on yours 9 through 14, but that's obviously a mistake. Information is given about the two triangles. State whether the triangles can be proven congruent by ASA, angle side angle, SSS, side side side, AAS, angle angle side, or SAS, side angle side. If the triangles cannot be proven congruent, state why. So the first one we're given is AB is congruent to FE, AC is congruent to FD, and angle A is congruent to angle F. As we can see, we have side angle side, which proves triangle congruency, so that's the answer for 25. 26 says angle A is congruent to angle F, angle B is congruent to angle E, and angle C is congruent to angle D. The problem with that is that cannot be proven congruent. And the reason why is what we're given is AAA, angle, 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 which is not sufficient enough information. All right, 27. Angle A is congruent to angle F, angle B is congruent to angle E, and AB is congruent to FE. So in this case we have angle side angle, which is enough criteria to prove triangle congruency. 28 says AB is congruent to FE, AC is congruent to FD, and BC is congruent to ED. Well, this gives us side, 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 which proves triangle congruency. So we can state that 28 is side, side, side. 29 says angle B is congruent to angle E. AC is congruent to FD, and BC is congruent to ED. What we can see is that we have side, side, angle, or angle, side, side, which means that we do not have sufficient criteria to prove triangle congruency. So it cannot be proven congruent. And the reason why is because side, side, angle is not sufficient enough information to prove triangle congruency. For the last one, 30, we see that angle A is congruent to angle F, AB is congruent to FE, and angle C is congruent to angle D. And what we're given is angle, angle, side. So angle, angle, side is enough information so we can state that they are congruent because of angle, angle, side. And this ends Unit 1, Topic 3 of the Honors Geometry Semester Exam Review.